Welcome to Season 3 of Connecting with Purpose. In our first 2 seasons, we explored how leading and living with purpose unlocks unique potential for us and our teams. This season, we're diving into how purpose helps us navigate change, build resilience, and elevate our ongoing performance, well-being, and impact. A special focus I'm really excited about is to highlight the transition of elite athletes into new opportunities. By raising awareness around this largely untapped talent pool, we'll bridge opportunities with businesses to create meaningful connections, drive value, and deliver lasting impact. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in.
Welcome everyone, episode 5 of season 3 today. I am so excited about this. Our guest today is all about inspiring people to overcome adversity. We both share this passion for inspiration. I just say that John Register has taken it to a whole new level. John always says if our truth outweighs our fear, we can commit to a courageous life. He is a true overcomer. Combat Army veteran, 2-time Olympic trialist, qualifier in the hurdles, but with one traumatic misstep. He lost his leg, and in that moment, his Olympic dreams and his military career seemed to disappear. However, John went under and took under, his own reckoning, revision, renewal, and he's really redefined what it means to be resilient. Since that amputation, he's gone on to win the long jump silver medal in Sydney, Australia, in the Paralympics. And he's inspired thousands of people around the world to amputate whatever it is that's getting in the way of them realizing their true potential. He founded the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee's Paralympic Military Sports Program that's helped thousands of wounded veterans using sport as a tool for rehabilitation. And I come from that sports for development space, and it is such a powerful tool for young people and obviously for veterans. And in John's capacity now as a coach and as a globally recognized Hall of Fame speaker, he's worked with multiple US presidents, secretaries of state, and leaders of industry from around the world. Personally, I've been lucky enough to meet John at the Real Leaders Unite conference in San Diego. We both live in Colorado. We've since then been virtual, but I was really lucky to join John on his Amputate to Elevate podcast last week. Today, I'd say I'm returning the favour, but it's really a double down of John giving me 2 favours, which I'm very much appreciative for. So, John, thank you so much for joining us on Connecting with Purpose. It's an honour to have you here. So, welcome.
You know, Marcus, it's a pleasure to be on with you and always to connect with purpose. I'm glad that our friendship is deepening. It was great to meet you out in San Diego area. It was a beautiful experience, but it's also just even more beautiful meeting you and getting to learn you even more. So happy to have this conversation with you today.
For the record, people, it was beautiful meeting me. Nobody has ever said that before. In quote, John Register. Thank you, John. Lovely. That will be up there somewhere on the wall. Okay, so we always kick off with magic moments, and for our listeners that have listened before, you know what they are. So apologies for going through the headlines, but for our new listeners, I just want to tee this up because I love to dive into magic moments with people as a way of just accelerating the knowing process. And the headlines on magic moments are when you look back on your life, and there's multiple moments that are going to stand out. But if you could think of 3 that with the benefit of time, you'd give them a 10 out of 10. Now, why do you give them a 10 out of 10? You give them a 10 out of 10 because of both how you reacted in the moment itself. Maybe it was an incredible moment of achievement or even an incredible moment of focus having to overcome an adversity. But you also give it a 10 out of 10 based upon the impact it had on your life after that particular moment. So the question is, and you've got 3 of these, so it's a really cheeky way of getting 9 pieces of information out of 3 questions. What were the 3 moments? What was it about them that made them magic? And if you had to give them a name, what would you call them?
It's wonderful. I like starting off this way. And the 3 moments are, I will say, a revelation that I didn't overcome adversity. and none of us do. The second is GTA, Grand Theft Auto. Dun, dun, dun. And the third is a purpose of understanding the deeper purpose meaning for my life, which has expanded. So the stories, what was going on. And so the first one, I was about to do a TEDx talk. Actually, I was about to take myself out of a TEDx talk because I didn't have it. I didn't think I had anything new to say. I was saying the same thing everybody else was saying. How'd you overcome the adversity? I overcame because I had my friends, my faith, my family, my freedom. That equaled my freedom. And it was just like, blah, right? I mean, it's colloquialisms, it's things we hear all the time. And I was about to call the curator to get out of it. And my friend really challenged me. He said, no, you need to be in. You got to do this. You have what you say is powerful. But I wasn't seeing it. And he was saying, but you did overcome the adversity. You went on to do all these things. You went on to, become a Paralympian after you lost your leg. You went on to become a swimmer. You went on to become, start these programs. And all those things are great, but that's not overcoming the adversity. And I would say all that is adapting around it. And what came out of my mouth was in a kind of, it was getting heated. And I said, I didn't overcome the adversity because had I overcome my adversity, had I overcome the amputation of my leg, my left leg, I would have my leg back. Mm. And that's what he said. He said, oh, interesting. Wow, that's right. And so that was the beginning of a thread for a pathway that shifted everything of how I see myself and view my life and now the lives of others to pour into them. Now, we do not overcome adversity. We adapt, we shift, we move around it, but we don't get back what we desire to have back after the trauma has impacted our life. And that's the first thread. Secondly, GTA, Grand Theft Auto. I went to go see my wife, Alice, and I lied to the University of Arkansas and the transportation motor pool. She was pregnant with our daughter, our son, John Jr., and I wanted to go see her for like a weekend. And so I took, borrowed one of the university vehicles, said I was going to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma to go get some pole for the pole vaults to bring them back. And I went the opposite direction all the way to Memphis, Tennessee. And don't do this at home, right? So could have been really disastrous, could have had an accident, anything could have happened, but I was young, dumb, and all that. And when I came back, Stanley Redwine from University of Kansas University, he's a former Olympic coach. He was my what do you call it, the graduate assistant coach for University of Arkansas. Fraternity brother. I had mad respect for him, and he called me to the office on the carpet, glaring, where the university is about to throw the book at me, and he was the intermediary. He inserted himself in that process. So my life could have gone an entirely different direction if it wasn't for Stanley coming in there. So who do we have in our lives that will buffer that when we do something stupid, right? Because all this other, we might have been having this conversation if it goes a different direction. And so that helped me to understand that the decision that we make, the consequences that we have, good or bad, are the results of our actions. And so that's how I have shared that. And then third is around my growth and understanding how I show up. Pat Enriquez asked the veterans group, which I was a member of for this entrepreneurship class, what's the most important thing in your business? And we all said different things. we said getting contacts, supply chain, all the stuff we talk about, marketing. She said, the most important question to ask in your business is, how are you going to dispose of your business? How are you going to wrap it up? Is it going to live beyond you, or are you just going to shut the doors down? You're going to put it on the New York Stock Exchange? How are you going to wrap this business up? And I said, wow, that is profound. And so it sat with me for like 6 months. And as I was thinking about that question, changed some things. I changed from John Register to Inspired Communication International, just in case I wanted to sell the company if it got big enough, right? So I shifted some things. But then I was thinking about, Mark, what about my life? And I want to hear my God say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter now into the joy of my rest." And that profoundly hit me because a lot of people, when they talk about quote unquote religion, are just talking about doing something religiously, not as a part of their entity, their full being. And so people, they go to church on Sunday or Saturday or synagogue or whatever, and we check the box. But
Hmm.
this was a decision to say, how do I do this? And it can't be me. So if my creator, my God, is breathing life into me, it's my duty, it's my obligation, my responsibility to breathe life into others, because that's the faucet, that's the sieve that comes through. That it's going to be, I'm going to always push out the life that's been given to me to breathe into others, so that they can then have uh, impact, influence, inspiration into their spheres of influence. And that's the inspiration. Inspiration is the comes from the Latin word inspiro, which means to breathe into. So here's the antithesis of it when I talk about it, right? If there's anybody in your life, I mean anyone at any time, who is not breathing into you, then they're taking things away from you. And it causes us to panic, to be unsure, to be uncertain, to freak out, to have burnout. And all, if that's happening to you, you have to remove yourself from that entity, because there's an opposing force as well from God, right? There is an enemy that only wants, the only mission, the only job is to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So if anybody is in your life doing that, or has an impact on other people doing that, it cannot be coming from the life giver. So which one are you following? And that's the simplest way that I can share it. Not beating anybody over the head, but you can't straddle the fence. You're either following and breathing life in others, or you are taking it away from others. It's one of the two. And so I choose to breathe life into others. And so that is a cornerstone of how I show up. And it's always to encourage, it's always to say, you got this, you can do this. And I can't, Mark, I can't make people jump. No one can make me jump. No one can make me commit to the thing I know I need to commit to. I have to do that. But I can certainly say, on the other side of that commitment, as we say, on the other side of the fear, what is it? What's the great life going to be? So when our truth outweighs our fear, we will commit to a courageous life. And that's where that quote comes from.
Yeah, and look, we had a chat a few weeks ago, and it was very clear from that conversation that your faith is your purpose. They're one and the same thing for you, and I think that's one of the benefits of faith for people that and faith means lots of different things to different people, right? But one of the benefits of faith is when you take it on board and internalize it, and then in your words, then you feel a duty. If God's breathing life into you, then you have a duty to breathe it into others. And we can all do that in different ways, but it is a choice. And for me, I come from a Christian family and did the go to church thing every weekend, right, and sang in the choir, and it was kind of hammered into me at school and everything else. And so I have my own beliefs around that. My purpose, which is creating opportunities that inspire people to go forward as the ultimate version of themselves, I'm sure is very much aligned to your purpose, and we kind of get them from different things. And I think what's really important for people is to make the choice and to be intentional that the outcome is about elevating others. Because if everybody did that, what a different world we'd be living in.
Absolutely. That's right. And so we get into, so why doesn't that happen? And so it usually becomes something that I have seen in somebody else that I'm desiring. And when I begin to desire or covet something that's in somebody else, that means I'm no longer on purpose, on my purpose. I'm on somebody else's purpose. I'm trying to find how can I get more of that. It's a friend of mine, Hillary Blair. I was speaking to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and I was appointed by Secretary Colin Powell, and then he left, and then Secretary Condoleezza Rice was next. So I served under her on a disability advisory committee, and then after she left new administration, then Hillary Clinton. So now this is my third kind of group, and as they're going around the table introducing everybody, everybody's kind of throwing down their cards. I'm so and so, Doctor so and so, PhD so and so. And I'm just the sports guy in the room, right? And so it gets to me. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Secretary Clinton's head's bouncing against her chest. Knows she's been up since 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. It's probably 12 hours straight running, just like they all do. And so her head's down, and I didn't say a thing, right? And so she looks up because the rhythm has stopped. And I banged my hand on the table. I said, "Madam Secretary, I'm a Razorback." So for those that don't know, Arkansas Razorbacks, and we call the Hogs and stuff. And she got her law degree out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, Razorback, her and her husband. So they're Razorbacks too. They got a house on that's out in Fayetteville. And so she perks up and she slams her hand back down the table too and says, "Well, we're just going to have to call the Hogs after this one's over with." Right? So there's a connection that happened. But what's going on is Hillary was telling me that there was this shift in power and status.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people. So let me explain and I'll say what's going on. So power is static. It doesn't move. But status is like a hockey puck. It's like a rugby ball. It moves from player to player, all over the place. All for the betterment of a goal that's going to happen. But there's only one person that really has the power. When you look at it in like American football, it's not the players who have the power. It's not the captain who has the power. It's not the coach who has the power. It's the owner who has the power, right? But we never talk about the owners on sports news, right? So we always talk about the shifting of the status. And when people have power, they only move the positions of those who desire power to elevate their status inside of the concept. And so that's what was happening, and I was understanding and why people don't go on with their purpose, because they're trying to elevate their status against a power source that's never going to give them power.
Yeah. And what's really interesting for that, because I think this is going to weave in really nicely to the next phase of the conversation, but this is what I see all the time coaching. And so what you saw in that room is the power game that's going on is largely around people's identity and their ego. And it starts with, this is my title, this is why I'm important, and this is what I'm responsible for. And guess what? There's a lot of really important people in that room responsible for some really important things. So yeah, of course, we get it. But this happens in business all the time. It happens in teams. It happens with athletes. It happens with military people and anybody, that you can get wrapped up in the roles that you play, in the identity, in the roles and responsibilities, right, of what that represents. And that's the power element of it. But actually the value and the only way to elevate other people is to understand what's behind and beneath the role. What's behind and beneath the role is your purpose and your principles and your focus and your character. And once you understand, double click, triple click down to that, and you own that, the role is purely a vehicle, right? The title is a vehicle, and the people in that room have a vehicle, and they can choose to use it for good, or they can choose to use it for power. When you think about that, how have you seen that show up? And what have been some of you've given that example of in that room there, but what have been some examples of when either you've been able to help somebody unpack that, or you've seen people unpack it, where they've been able to step out of the role and the identity and see their own purpose and their own principles and what really drives them, and use that as a bridge to transfer how they choose to show up in that or other areas of their life. What have been some of the things you've seen there, and what works, if you like, in terms of helping people tap into that element of best self?
Well, in that room, I think there has to be a recognition, a reckoning, as I always say. And the reckoning in this moment is that she already knows who's in the room. So why are you trying to elevate yourself to a room that you were invited to come into because you were on a list to come into the room? So why are you trying to do that, right?
Exactly.
So you're already in the room. And I guess it's in Hamilton, you got to be in the room where it happens, the room where it happens. And so if you're already in the room, there's no reason to elevate yourself. So then that I think that becomes a self-awareness piece.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm trying to do that, then I am what's going on with me that I need to elevate myself in a room that I've already been invited into, because there's a conversation that needs to happen. Am I trying to jockey? Why am I trying to jockey for some type of position when I'm already in the room? And so what I've seen in this is when people are able to just relax and bring the knowledge that they have the specific team member role that they were invited to do, then the organization can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
The goal that you're after can go, or the whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, it goes more forward with ease, because no one is trying to say my point is better than your point because my title is higher than your title.
Yeah.
Or perceived, because we perceive titles. We don't, titles just, it doesn't really, it could be a title, but we don't that does not equate to competency. That does not equate to experience. I don't have a title of right now well, I guess I'm CEO of my own company, but I don't wear that title for like a business any longer, like I used to have. And nor do I need to. But I do operate in less than the 1%, right? So what does that mean? When I went to the Olympic trials, those that start out trying to make an Olympic Games and make an Olympic standard, less than 1% will actually achieve that, right? I made it in 3 different events. So I was less than 1% of the entire population that begins to try to make an Olympic team, less than 1%. To make a Paralympic team after an injury, it's less than 0.0005%. Think about that. So I'm less than 0.0005% of those after being injured make a Paralympic team. And then I win a medal at the games. And then after I start speaking full time, I'm less than now 2% of the population inside of our organization that has made the Hall of Fame. So this had to be pointed out to me, by the way. Okay, this is like last week, right? Because we don't see
this is fresh. This is fresh.
It's fresh. We just do these things because we're just living, and we don't see some of the impacts, Mark, that we're actually making. So when we have somebody cover our blind spots, we can see that we're operating at a very high level. So I don't want to operate at the 99%. I want to operate less than 1%, because if I can have that focus on purpose, on mission, that I can explode the universe by the inspiration that I can have in my sphere of influence. And what if we all could just do that? Just not chase after what somebody else has, but focus on and it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. This is hard work, because I'll see the other speakers that are out there that are getting the major checks and on the massive stages, and I may want to covet that or desire that, but that's not where I need to be. Yeah. Unless that's where I become, right? So I don't need to chase after that. So what do I do when I get that feeling of jealousy, when I get that feeling of envy? I usually will write a note to that person or put it on LinkedIn, congratulations, saw you on that. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Your message is right on target. It's so good, right? So I squelch that voice out of me and I go back on my purpose of adding life, adding value. And I think that's the hard part because and no one knows that's going on inside of me, but I do. And so I need to squelch that noise. And that's how I do it. I just attack it.
Yeah, so there's two things that really underpin that from what I heard there. First is self-awareness, just truly knowing yourself beneath the identities and the role and the ego, but to the things that enable you to interact, enable you to elevate other people. And therefore, the second piece, which is intentionality. Self-awareness helps drive intentionality so you can apply your best self characteristics to make an impact on the world, on the people you choose to surround yourself with, regardless of what your role is, because the role's a vehicle. And by the way, we've got multiple roles in life, right? We've got the dad role, and we've got the leader role, or the speaker role, or the coach role, coaching the community role, the friend role, whatever the roles are, there's a lot of roles. And the value of the self-awareness and the intentionality is it enables you to elevate other people through each of those roles. And so I feel like the purpose and the faith are the grounding elements to the intentionality. I'm thinking about application of this for back to your sort of experience. This season, we've been focusing a bit about elite athletes, transition, challenges around transition, and the opportunities of bridging some of that talent to corporate America. And it's not to say corporate America is the haven for everybody, but there's some bridges that can be built, I believe, that could really help elevate opportunities on both sides. When you think back to your time and your experience, from both your own perspective, but those of others that you've supported, these elements of self-awareness, intentionality, and faith and purpose, what's been missing? Or firstly, I suppose, what are some of the challenges that you see that athletes and military folks in transition face? And I understand they're different in terms of probably the application of the battle or the competition, but there's a lot of similarities as well. What do you see as some of the challenges that they face? And from a solutions perspective, how does self-awareness, kind of faith, purpose, and intentionality play into them realizing their potential in whatever the next phase is for them?
One of the challenges I see both in military and in sports, so high-level performing athletes, I work with professional athletes, so Olympians, Paralympians, or those that might be in basketball and NFL, NBA. And one of the things I see is tunnel vision to their discipline, their craft. And so it's almost taboo. It is taboo for an athlete to think about after career because they believe it's taking away from the essence of who they are in the moment. And that's a struggle. That's a real challenge. I mean, other people that are listening to the show, like, well, how could they do that? I mean, well, it's easy because they're only focused on the one thing. And we do it too, right? In our businesses, we focus on the one thing and we can't get ourselves out of the blinders of what actually comes next. So even in our world, we'll say, well, that athlete made so much money. They made, millions of dollars. And at the end of their opportunities, they squandered all their money. Well, a lot of us, their earnings years were from 6 years of age when they first started their sport all the way to maybe 30, 35. So they had their career of earning, right? It just came at one small time. Ours comes over the cross of the longevity, maybe after graduating college to 65, 70 years of age. Now, we probably made a lot of what they probably have. So what have we done with ours, right? So did we plan the way they planned the short window over the longevity? So we have to, number one, think about the long-term game. And for them, my coach, Remy Korchevny, Ukrainian, brilliant man, 93 years old now, he said to me, John, everything is training. Everything is training. So what you put into your body, how much rest you get, how intense that you work, how the intensity of your workouts, driving to the practice, making sure that you're up on time. All these things that he was sharing with me, and it was also to include what's your transition. The transition out, because you're going to get hurt. You're not going to be fast enough anymore, or you're just not going to be good enough. So there's going to be new talent that comes in. So one of those areas, you're leaving the sport. So what can we do? One of the one of the activities I share with athletes who get a chance to travel is I say, make sure that if you're going international, that you check in with our U.S. Department of State. Check in with the ambassador that's in the country that you're going to and just offer your services. Tell them you're going to be in town. And they will swoop you up, take you over, because we love sports. So sports ambassadors, sports envoys, they want to hear the story, and they'll be happy. They'll bend over backwards for the most part to try to get a person in. And you might be able to help them with the diplomatic situation that's going on, because their athlete that's having the competition in the country you're in, and there's an automatic connection, and you can have friendship through the sport. I think the other thing, when you talk about corporations and companies, many companies sponsor events. So look, the athletes, what they can do is look who's sponsoring the event, try to find out the marketing person, the CEO, or somebody in the C-suite, to have a conversation with them while they are at the venue, or after, or before the game, or whenever it makes the most sense. Maybe there's an event that you can have. Maybe there's a fireside chat you can do before the event, and make it a thing which that's revenue generating, right? So you come in and say, hey, I want to do this, but also maybe you were marketing when you were in college and you want to talk to that marketing person. So now you're developing relationships as you are moving through your journey. And so those are just two of the ways I share with athletes to continue to build their cachet, their credibility, and then put on their LinkedIn profile, on their resume, to make sure that people know that they are engaged. I have one professional athlete that plays basketball. I'm not sure exactly where he's at in Europe right now, because he changes teams all the time. And that's exactly what we do. The other thing I share is read books. This guy's a voracious reader, right? And oftentimes we peg athletes only into the athleticism that we see on the basketball court, on the soccer field, on the rugby field, and we paint them in the very small picture, because that's what excites us. That's how we are entertained. But how are they entertained after the sports has finished? And that's what they want to do. Some people, they love just being isolated by themselves. Some people, they like going out to the theater. Some people love movies. Some people like playing video games. And some people like reading. They're all different, and that's how they recover from whatever pressures that they're in. So that's what I say. The self-awareness, to make sure that you know that everything is training, and then secondarily, let's put a system behind it. So reach out to people as you are moving around the world in the capacity of your athleticism, to help you in your transition later on.
Well, what I love about that is, whether it's relationships or reading, there's a proactivity to it that builds upon the assets that they already have. It's not saying we're taking you away from your tunnel vision or your focus to perform in the top 1% of the 1% of the 1%. What we're saying is, because you're in the top 1% of the 1% of the 1%, who can you connect with? What can you do with that one is going to enrich your life, enrich their life, and through doing that, potentially create opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't have seen. And if you bring that back to your experience, especially as you said how fresh the 0.0005% and the top 2% of the speaking population, not people that can speak, but the professional speaking population. We talked about that sort of intentionality and focus and drive. When you think back to your transition, which from an athletic perspective was in some respects really abrupt in terms of what you were expecting it to be, but then you revised it, right? Then you repurposed it into, actually, here's the next phase of my athletic career. And I'm assuming that your military career kind of overlapped with that transition. When you think about that focus to perform and what was driving you then, what did that broader application of training look like for you beyond just performing on the track, or in capacity in your then military role?
I think the first thing that's coming up for me is, because I've been to Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, because I'd been on a team at the University of Arkansas, which had many Olympians on it, I saw excellence all the time around me. Like only 10% of those that serve in the military actually go to combat. So it's another, 1% of the 1%, right? It's another one of those things. But all that culminates when trauma hits you. And because it was so abrupt, there was lots of things that came into my head. You were asking about how I brought all that into that world. And I'll give you an example. After my wife shared with me, you know what, she said, John, we're going to get through this together. It's just our new normal. That was really the baseline spark for me to say, okay, I need to get back up. So I had my
And John,
faith.
sorry, let me just interrupt.
Yeah.
For those people that don't know, apologies. And I'm only going to say this because you've made me cry twice when you've shared the next part of this story. But this is literally, John has had a traumatic injury from just landing tiny millisecond wrong off a hurdle that dislocated his knee, led to ultimately an amputation of his leg. And now John's in a wheelchair outside with his wife, and for the first time just doesn't feel his own self-worth. He's just, I'm not the person I was. I literally have lost my leg, right? And his wife's just like, this is our new normal. So this is where we're at in the backstory, just to give people some context on that.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah. So as I'm going through this and all these presses are against me or trying to tear me down, right? My identity. Am I still a husband? Am I still a father? Do I still have a job in the military? Can I support my family? My Olympic dreams are over. My military career is over. I'm not going to officer candidate school. All those things were hitting me like a ton of bricks. And they weren't just like layering on. It was like they were dumping on me and trying to hold me down, right? It wasn't that I thought of this one day and another thing on the next day and another thing on the next day. It was like all in a minute. All these things were just like
completely overwhelming.
And I just, and here I am in this wheelchair. I just lost it, right? I just started crying uncontrollably. And as you said, Mark, my wife, she's playing with my son in the swing. She comes running over, asking what's wrong. And through my tears, I try to get out through the breaths, sobs. I'm articulating to her everything that's in my head that I had the night before. And that's what she said, we'll get through this. It's just our new normal. So the first thing that I did, the first action I took after I made the determination that, I'm going to get back up again, was I got out of bed on my good leg, my sound leg, swung my leg over the bed slowly, because it took me a long time. Like, we're talking, this is slow motion now. It was, I just jumped out. I forced myself to stand up on my good leg for 10 seconds. And then I sat back down. And I forced myself again about 5 minutes later, stand up for 15 seconds. And I sat back down. 30 seconds, sat back down. And that's where it begins. It's not trying to see the Paralympic Games and long jump and all. I didn't even know about the Paralympic Games. I was trying to, how do I get myself back to a healthy, active normality of what I know to be true? I know I don't have this one leg, so I don't know how far I can actually get, but I'm going to start with standing up on my good leg for 10 seconds. Right. That was the first iteration. And so then I had to learn how to manipulate a wheelchair, right? So I'm learning again. That's what on my model, I talk about this renewal phase, the last phase. When a commitment has been made, now you're no longer the expert. You have to give yourself space and grace to grow, to get yourself back to an expert again, to get yourself back to the 1% of the 1%. You have to begin with the one step. And the hardest mindset shift I had to have was physical and mental. And that was on June 17th, 1994. I was in the worst pain I had ever been in my life. I was in my cousin's house in San Antonio, Texas. She wasn't home. My wife had gone back to Arkansas to her job. I'm healing up at Brook Army Medical Center. My son's there with Alice back in Arkansas. And I couldn't get any rest. It's one of those things where the pain is so great that no matter if you're sitting down or standing up, if you're trying to put a cool pack on it or a hot pack on it, trying to take some Tylenol or just leave it alone without you're trying to eat something or not eat something. It's just like nothing is working and the pain is intensifying. And then at 5:30 that night, around 5:30 on the television, I'm watching on closed circuit. I'm watching on the television a news report that comes out on a white Bronco going down the I-405 freeway, which happens to be O.J. Simpson in the back. And none of us know what's happening, no one knows what's going on. All we are seeing is the first news reports of this with this whole police follow behind him, right? So that's June 17th, 1994. And as I'm watching that, the reporters start reading an alleged suicide note from the Juice. I was like, reeling in pain. I said, here's a man who's got everything. I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy winner. He is, he's on all these commercials. He's a movie star. He's beloved by the nation. All these things are in his life, and he's about to take his life. What is going on with him that would put him to such a point? And as I was thinking about that, I was overwhelmed with a spirit that just said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that was my call to go through that. No matter how bad it got, I was never going to check out. There was always going to be something better on the opposite side, but I was going to have to walk through this piece on my own. It was going to be my night in Gethsemane. This was going to be hard. This was going to be probably the hardest journey I'd ever been on, because I knew it was going to get worse, because my leg's not only healing on the outside, it's healing on the inside from the amputation, right? Yeah. And so that's a space where we can't really lead from, right? Because it's too painful. The wound is too fresh. And I find a lot of speakers, they have these great stories or soon to be great stories, but they're too fresh, and they begin hemorrhaging all over the audience, and they can't bring them back. Right? They just share. I was horrible stories, right? From rapes to incarcerations to murders and all. I mean, some really harsh stuff I've heard from the stage, without a way to learn the lesson. Because what I've learned is we want to lead from our scars and not our wounds. And if you haven't recovered, if you're still wounded, you can't lead from that space.
Yeah. I I mean, there's so much here. I'm like, oh, why do we only have a 1 hour window? We might have to do a part two, but what the question I'd written down prior to you sharing the OJ Simpson visual, which is really interesting because I was in the US at that time, actually watching it on TV as well in Washington DC. Just randomly, I've been here for 4 months and halfway through. So a completely different experience watching exactly the same thing.
Right.
And here you are, and you're in the worst pain you've ever been. You've taken the first few critical, not even steps, like just balancing on one leg as the first part of training, the first step, the second step, the third step, the fourth step, and these obviously build up. And at some point, you move from the wound to the scar, and you move into this new phase. And maybe this is the renewal for you, but when did the Inspiro piece kick in? I'm assuming your faith had always been there. That's what gave you that spirit to like, this is going to get worse, but I'm going to get through it. But when in that journey of all of those steps, did you recognize that you had this profound opportunity to pass on this gift to so many people?
I think I had glimpses of it early on, even on the track when I was injured, but there was nothing. It was all jagged. I was dealing way too much. I think the first time I realized that something could happen was many years later. I think the Inspiro was always there. The inspiring piece was always there. I just never really saw it because I was living through it. And it wasn't time for me to share because I didn't have anything to share. There was nothing I learned from this. I'm still in pain, right? And it was at a TARE mission, Total Army Involvement in Recruiting, where I was a sports specialist for the Army's world-class athlete program. So I ended my service in the military and became a sports specialist in the program that I was once an athlete in, the world-class athlete program. And I had these athletes that I would take down to these locations, these high schools, with the accessions command, so the recruiting command. And we'd go in front of these high schools to try to put troops in boots, and I would be the MC of the program, and I would introduce the next athlete speaker to come up and tell their journey, and I would do the next thing. So about 35-minute class periods that we had. We did it a couple times, and we bounced out of there. Well, I would tell these quips and these little jokes about my leg. And I would say, I know you're all thinking that my favorite restaurant's IHOP, right? It was just these dad jokes, right? But the kids are cracking up.
Right? I'm laughing because it is a dad joke, which now appeals to me, of course.
Right. So I would do like 3 or 4. Then I'd say a poem, one of my favorite poems or something, and to articulate how I was thinking about myself, my journey, my leg. Whether it was the thing I have up back here is in the arena by Teddy Roosevelt, or If by Rudyard Kipling. So I would have those memorized, and I would share those, and the kids were leaned in on them because I would Rudyard Kipling, one of his lines is if you can meet with triumph and disaster. When I say disaster, I roll up my pants leg and I showed my artificial leg, right? And so and treat those two imposters just the same. So they were in this, they were leaned in, and the principals asked the recruiters, could I come back and do a 35-minute presentation? Because someone, those kids were being inspired by it. And so that was the first inkling of that there was something greater beyond myself. And I needed to explore that. And it wasn't until I would say maybe 2014, maybe 13 or 14, that I got coaching on how to pull that story from me. I was too afraid to tell the story. And the reason I was afraid to tell the story was because I didn't want to hemorrhage all over everybody. I didn't know if I was past it, right? And I was afraid to go there to find out that I really wasn't past it. I was going to uncover something that I didn't know that was even there.
Mm.
And so I gave it to a man, his name is Doug Stevenson, and he really helped pull that story from me, the one I shared with you all out in California. And it's a riches rags to riches storyline. And the riches start off at one level, the rags go all the way down to the basement, and the riches again come up higher than the riches that we started with. And so that's the model that we want to have for everybody that's going through some type of traumatic experience, no matter what you think that trauma is for you. It's all trauma for us in different ways. So we always want to, in breathing life, we always want to elevate beyond the place that we jumped off from, because that's what happens when you plant seeds, right? Saying your earlier before the show started, saying your grandfather was a farmer. So when farmers plant seeds in the ground, the seed germinates, it dies, and then it starts growing again. It starts growing, and it produces way more than it was just the one seed that was in the ground. It
Mm.
produces a harvest. So I have to be very cautious about what I say to people, and I'm cautious about what they say to other individuals, because that's a seed that you're planting, and it will spring a harvest in your life. So if you're planting negative seeds and you're always, why can't I get ahead? Why am I always in debt? Why am I always this? Because you're planting that seed all the time, and that's the law. It's just the law of the land. It's the law that God put in the earth. You will have seed time and harvest time, and the harvest is going to be always greater than the seed. So that's one thing that I was learning during this time, and I said I'm going to always plant good seed,
Mm.
right? Uh,
Mm.
and the good soil. I want it to grow.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, and I think that's part of it, right? It's that whole nurturing process and the intentionality of the seeds you're planting, where you're planting them, and how you're planting them, and what season, and so on and so forth. There's so much intentionality and preparation that has to go into that inspiration piece. And yeah, I feel like there's a whole second part to talk about on that, the 2014 and beyond journey, the last 10
Right.
years. But if you've still got a couple of minutes, just to sort of wrap up, there's been so much here, and I'd love to, first, if you could just tell everybody where can they hear more about your story, and about the work you do. Where's the best place for people to find you, John?
Thanks. The best place is on Beehive, BEEHIIV.com. So if you go to John Register, just that common spelling, JOHNREGISTER Beehive, BEEHIIV.com, you'll find all of what I'm posting, what I'm up to right now. So right now we do, every Wednesday we drop a podcast. Every Saturday I take 3 lessons from that podcast and create a leadership, I guess it's like an executive session that I do, just to kind of help executives with the what's going on here, why is this important for you. And then on Tuesday I drop okay, now that you know this, what's your action step to it. And I find that it falls off on Tuesdays because people, they're just busy or whatever, but action steps are hard. Just to take one action. Can you take one action step a week to get you closer to a goal that you have hit? I'm not for everybody. I'm only for folks that, if you want to get something done, we're going to work on it together. I need help as well, but I just don't. I That's my Achilles heel, Mark, is I don't have time or life. I heard insert life for time, right? Then you'll know how to elevate a little bit more. And so for those that they're on the fence, they're kind of wishy-washy. I'm probably not the best coach for you, right? So we're actually going to get some stuff done, and we're going to put some timelines on it and hold you accountable. If that's not you, I'm not for you. So that just weeds out a lot of people real quick, right? And so that's what we do. And then we have from there is a once a month we do from that group a training session that we take, and we just do a deeper dive on one of the topics. People just choose what they want to do. We have folks in there from Denmark, from California, and we get 4 or 5 show up. Whoever shows up shows up. on the call, but we have a really great conversation for an hour, and then you go back off to doing what you were doing. It's just really impactful, and I don't ever come in saying that I'm going to do the work for you, right? It's your responsibility to do the work. We
Yeah.
just set the table before you, and you get a chance to choose what you want to work on. And I think that's the kind of the best way for it.
Yeah, everything is training, right? You just got to provide people with some raw
Everything's training.
materials to
Right.
practice. So the last question, John, when we think about purpose, we talk about it being at the intersection, essentially living intentionally, to your point, living intentionally, using your time and energy intentionally at the intersection between your passions and your impact. And I just wanted to talk about impact quickly, and just ask you, you know, as you think about your life and sort of and this next chapter, and you fast forward as far as you want to go, if you wanted to define the impact you've been able to have on the people that you've been able to and chosen to surround yourself with the most, what would you want them all to say if you got to the opportunity to interview those thousands and thousands of people at the very end of the road? What would be the top 3 things you'd want them to say about the impact you've had on their lives?
Oh, wow. I think it's always good to say thank you. I think another one is, look what I've done with what you've helped me with. And the third is not so much what they would say. I think it's more of what I choose to listen to now. I formulate this inside of ripples and echoes. So ripples go out from us and they dissipate, but echoes, like waves, they'll come back to us. And so the echoes that I'm listening for are things that will correct my course, like a dolphin in the water or sonar that guides us, guides them, and or echoes that validate that you're on the right path. And so those thank yous and the just as I would go back and say thank you to another, and say look what I've done is with what you've shared with me, I think is the ultimate kind of compliment, right? That it's not that you just got the information, but you actually did something with the information that I don't, you might have seen it in a total different light than myself. I might have been thinking about one way and you did it a totally different way, but you did something with it. And so let's celebrate how you have used that to help other individuals. And I think that's the ultimate.
Yeah, I love that. And if I was going to summarize that then, based on what you just said at the end, because I was assuming that what they've done to help others is the ripple. That's the ripple effect, the intentionality of the seeds that ripple out. I talk about the weight behind the boat. That's the ripple effect. So at the end of the day, the impact, you'd love people to say thank you. Look what I've been able to do, because I've been able to listen intentionally for the echoes that enable me to get better, and for the ones that validate me to bring my best self to make the ripple effect on others, so they can all be in a better place. Not perfect, right? But the point is that intentionality and people practicing listening for the right echoes and applying them intentionally to impact others, that literally amplifies and elevates impact for thousands. And so it really sums up why you're here, John, and why this was such an awesome interview. And we just ran out of time, so apologies for going a little bit over, but thank you very much for being here. That was an awesome conversation.
Thank you, sir.